Okay, we're recording. Good morning and welcome to the Institute of Jewish Knowledge and Learning. We're here with Jeffrey Segelman. And the Parsha this week is Ki Tetzei. I've never said it actually. And Tetzei. And I see him pensively looking at his notes, so I'm going to turn it over to him, Rav Jeff.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Let's Parsha Ki Tetzei. I just have, before we even share the text, we're going to make what will undoubtedly be an unsuccessful attempt to run through the Parsha, as we often try to do, just to give you a sense of what's in the Parsha. This Parsha does not have much of a storyline. It is there are 74 mitzvot in this Parsha. Now, if you think about this, just think about it statistically. There are 613 mitzvot. There are 54 parshas. That one parsha should have 74 mitzvot it's off the charts. One could spend a lifetime in Parshat Ki Tetzei. But I hope that you will. I hope that you will go back and look at it, as you'll see as we just do this really, really super quick, unsatisfying run through. That so much of the moral and ethical underpinnings of Judaism are to be found here. Okay, I mean, there are also problematic things. Nothing's free, but there's a lot of beautiful stuff. Dvorah?
Well, I find it so interesting that it's in like the very end of the Torah. Yeah. And especially because it's in a parsha where, like, if you don't have services in the summer, which I lived that life, I never got to read it. So it's relatively new to me to be looking at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people never read these things.
Well,
but it's interesting that it waits so long to put all this important information in.
Well, yeah, well, the first and end of your question it really is very interesting, because not only is it at the end of the Torah, but it's in the last days of Moses's life. There's almost it's not an afterthought, but it's almost as if reality struck. And, it's one thing to give a law and to teach a law when we are wandering in a desert for 40 years. It's another thing, you realize what you need to talk about when they're entering the land tomorrow, and they're looking at it with the urgency of tomorrow. But yes, you're right. On the other hand, the Torah does not have an internal reading process. I mean, there's a mitzvah, the 612th mitzvah is called Hakel, and every 7 years the king would read the Torah to the people, but there's no internal mechanism for the public reading of the Torah in the Torah. That was something that came much later. So the Torah can't apologize if a parsha happens to fall in the summer, or a parsha happens to fall, and almost more importantly, remember that the parshas don't line up with the Jewish calendar either. Okay, I mean, we're not reading the Exodus of Egypt at Pesach time. We read the Exodus of Egypt like in January, and then we have to interrupt our regular reading to go back at each holiday and to read the thing that was. So it's not lined up with any calendar at all. Okay, all right. Let's go into the text. And Safari, huh? Okay, here we go. Buckle up. We're really not gonna the part, and there's nothing that we're doing in our Hasidic texts from this first chapter, but this has to do with a soldier who would discover a beautiful woman in a time of battle and want to take her home and marry her. There is the question of not being able to choose between wives, that your bechor, your firstborn, comes from the wife who had it, not necessarily the one who you like. You're not allowed to do that. Very, very interesting question of what to do with a wayward and defiant child. We've talked about this in past years. The mitzvah to bury a corpse is actually derived from this parsha, that if somebody was committed a capital offense and was killed by the court, their body was hung, their dead body. They didn't die by hanging, but after they had died, the body would be hung, but only for the day. It had to be buried at night. And so we learned that if the body of somebody who was so bad that they were convicted of a capital crime has to be buried that night, then how much the more so should a tzaddik be buried that night? So speedy burials are happening from here. Then we go into the next chapter. If you see something that a fellow man has lost, then you have to return it. The mitzvah of hashavat aveda. You have to give back what is lost. And if you don't know who it is, you hold on to it until someone will claim it. And it might cost you money if it's the animal, because you've got to feed the animal. Okay, so it's not an insignificant mitzvah. If you see a fellow Israelite's ass or ox fallen on the road, you can't pretend that you didn't see it. You have to go and help them. And now we're going to study this verse, because this is one of the verses. The next 3 verses or 4 verses are part of our Hasidic text study. Lo yiyeh kli gever al isha, a woman must not put on man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing, for whoever does these things is abhorrent to your God. Okay, now we're going to see a Hasidic text that takes this way out of the pshat, but let's just talk about what the halachic pshat is. It's debated, but what it doesn't mean, let's start with it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that a man can never wear a woman's clothing, nor can a woman, it doesn't mean that a woman can never wear man's clothing. That's not what it means. That happens all the time. I mean, it might happen by just cross-dressers, but I mean, it happens, you know, it happens very often. A man and a woman, they're going to the movies and the movie theater is very cold. So she'll say to her husband or her boyfriend, can I wear your coat? You know, your suit jacket, or if it's a wedding. You mean you want to tell me that she can't do that? Of course she can do that. Of course she can do that. Can a man dress up as Queen Esther on Purim? Absolutely. That the halacha here is, and it's debated, either, and it's probably both, one should not disguise oneself as a member of the opposite gender in order to do anything or set up something that is promiscuous or untoward. Okay, a man wants to peek in the ladies' room, so he dresses up like a lady so he can see the ladies' room. Okay, anything that would be untoward, that would be promiscuous, if that's the motivation, then it's forbidden. The other thing that's very interesting is that there are some, and this is actually canonized in the Shulchan Aruch, who says that we're really not talking about apparel per se. We're talking about those things which are uniquely gendered, meaning, and they give this example, a sword, a knife, a gun. Now, this, remember, today, I mean, my daughter carries a gun, okay, but this was in a time where women did not bear arms, that a woman could not bear arms. This was kli gever. This was uniquely a masculine thing. And the other side would be jewelry. That, I mean, today many men wear earrings, but the prohibition to not wear things that are obviously women's. Today, the earrings don't count. And by the way, the provision on this law is it depends upon the custom of the place. So, for example, it may have been at some periods of history that pants would have been prohibited by women. But today, the halach is very clear. Pants aren't. Women wear pants all the time. Pants are made to fit women's bodies. So you can't say that this is a male thing. So a lot of it depends on the time, but it really is designed to ultimately to avoid promiscuity. Dora?
Well, the example that you just gave about pants, what that means is that the local culture, as it evolves, changes the meaning of what's in the Torah. Then.
Correct. Well, it doesn't change the meaning of what's in the Torah. It changes the definition of words. So it used to be that an earring would have been a woman's and a woman's only. But today, many men wear earrings. It is acceptable within the society for men to wear earrings. So therefore, that's no longer in the category of women's clothes. However you want to play out this mitzvah, that if the society is not, I wouldn't say encouraging, but it's certainly it's not moved anymore. It doesn't. No one blinks when you see a man with an earring. So that now no longer falls into the category. And it's again same with pants. Okay, once you have pant makers making pants that are designed for women's bodies, then you can't call that men's. It's women's. Okay, so that's the pshat. Okay, we're gonna see what the Hasidic text does with it, what the Kabbalistic text does with it, but that's the pshat. Let's finish learning these three verses, and then we'll go and we'll stick with the Hasidic text. Very famous mitzvah. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go. Actually, it means send the mother away and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. Okay. Yeah. So what's pshat? What's the simple meaning? First of all, this falls into a category called there's something called a mitzvah kiyuma and a mitzvah chiyuva. That there is some mitzvot that you are absolutely positively obligated to do. They're not negotiable. Honor your father and mother. Then there are other mitzvot that you don't have to do them. But if you set out to do this, you have to do it in a particular way. So this is if, okay, in order for this mitzvah to kick in, you have to be walking along the way, you have to be hungry, you have to see a nest with a mother bird sitting on eggs or babies, and then you got to want to eat it. But you could walk by it. Or you may never encounter such a thing in your entire life. You don't have to search it out. If you find yourself in this situation, then that's the way you have to handle it. Okay? One of the most famous mitzvah kiyumits is there a mitzvah to live in Israel? There's no obligatory mitzvah to live in Israel. But if you go to Israel, it is a mitzvah. Okay, now that's not for everything, but there's just another example of a certain type of mitzvah, which is not mandatory, but it remains mitzvah if you do it. Okay, so you may never do this, and you don't need to. But if you do, you need to shoo away the mother bird before you take what's in the nest. And not only that, but there's a reward for this, that you may have long life, which is also the same reward for honoring father and mother in the Ten Commandments, which leads the rabbis to say that never try to figure out the reward or the value of a mitzvah, because the most difficult mitzvah in the world is taking care of our mother and father, and you get a reward for long life, whatever that means. And the mitzvah that's the easiest mitzvah in the whole world, because you don't even have to do it. You get the same reward. So you can't don't sit and say, well, this is more important than this. Okay, that's the basis of this, of that thinking. You don't know. You don't know what's more important and what's less important. But here's that's the mitzvah and the simple pshat, and our presumption is, even though the Torah doesn't say it, but our presumption is, and universally, that it's cruel. We're on the top of the food chain and we're entitled to the eggs. But we don't have to cause undue aggravation to the mother. She doesn't have to watch us take her eggs. Now, is she going to be upset when she returns to the nest and the eggs aren't there? Of course. But we are entitled to the eggs because we're human beings. But we have to play out our role at the top of the food chain with as much rachmanus to animals and to the world as we can. And so that's what this is about. Okay, again, the Hasidim are going to take this someplace else, but that's the simple shot. One more mitzvah. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof. Okay, meaning, and presumably, if you look at houses, I mean, some houses we have most of our houses, roofs are kind of slanted for rainfall, or if you live in New York, the snow, you don't want it to pile up on your roof. But in the Middle East, people had flat roofs and they did stuff on their roof. Okay, Bathsheba was sunbathing on her roof when David HaMelech happened to be looking out. Okay? People lived on their roof. So the mitzvah is that when you build a house, you have to put up a fence around the roof so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone should fall from it. I mean, it's very simple. I mean, what could be more pshat than that? It's very logical. Okay, so we have three mitzvahs here. One with regard to men's and women's clothing, one with regard to the mother bird and Rachmanis on the mother bird, and one about building a fence along our roof so that nobody will fall. As long as we're doing this, I'm just going to go to one more verse later on. This is a mitzvah about how to keep the ritual purity of the camp, particularly in a military setting. When you go out as a troop against your enemies, be on guard against anything untoward. If anyone among you has been rendered impure by a nocturnal emission, we're all familiar that happens, that it's an involuntary ejaculation, and that is in any involuntary flow from the body is considered to be rendering the person spiritually impure. So he must leave the camp and must not re-enter the camp until toward evening. He shall bathe in water, go to the mikvah, and at sundown he may re-enter the camp. Okay. Again, it's a pretty straightforward law. Okay, obviously it's the honor system. because how else would anyone know that one had a nocturnal emission? But we're all commanded that if this happens to us, and that's not about being good or bad, it's about being a human being. If this happens to you, then you are ritually impure. You should leave the camp, go to mikveh at the end of the day, and then come back, and then everything is honky-dory, all good. Okay. 4 mitzvot of the 74 mitzvot in this parsha. We're going to now see through the eyes of our Hasidic texts. Any questions so far? We're good? Okay. Devorah, you're up. Okay. What you're seeing, the mess that you're seeing at the top of the page is that what I just wrote at the top of the page was the bottom of the previous page. So rather than creating an extra piece of paper or an extra thing I just figured, well, let me write it, and then we'll just have one piece of paper here. So it's Parshat Ki Teitzei. This is the Orach Chaim, and it's on the verse, no article of man's clothing shall be on a woman, and no man shall wear a woman's clothing, woman's dress. And then I didn't put here, because it's an abomination to God, which wasn't important to us when we were talking about Pshat, but it's going to be important to us when we are doing the Hasidus. Okay, so this is, by the way, what's his name? From Zlochov. Avram Nachum of Zlochov is speaking to us now. Again, all of this is happening in the 18th century. We know that in the act of giving to a fellow person, the giver also often receives more than the one who accepts the gifts. Okay, we know that. And our sages have said the pauper does more for the householder who gives alms than the householder does for the pauper. And anyone who is involved in the world of tzedakah, you know that this is true. That the person who gives tzedakah gets as much, if sometimes more, out of it than the recipient. The same is true of giving Torah. As one of the sages said, I learned much from my teachers, but from my students most of all. Okay, so here I come to teach a class, and I end up learning more than the people that I'm trying to teach. This being the case, the one who gives must take care not to feel pride over the one who receives, saying in his heart, I am the giver. This one needs me and is receiving from me. The fact is that you are receiving more than the other. Okay, so just because you're in the position of the giver does not give you a right to have pride, because you're actually the one who's receiving. So now let's go in. The article of man's clothing refers to such a giver. Although you are in the male active role, okay, and I might as well stop here. The sense here of the Hasidic teaching is the male is the giver and the woman is the feminine is the receiver. Now, I don't think that is sociological. I think that's biological. I think that the rabbis are just looking at the biology here, the physiology. Although you are in the male active role, you must not think of yourself as superior to the passive female receiver in this interaction. Rather, think as you give either thought or of money that you are receiving more than you're giving. And then, no man shall wear a woman's dress. Now, I have no idea how the next sentence got born. This seems to refer to acts of worship, whether Torah study or the fulfilling of mitzvot. But however it gets here, you should not be thinking of your own benefit or pleasure. If you do, you are dressing in the mental garment of a woman or one who receives. No man shall wear a woman's dress means that you should intend only to please, that is, to give to your Creator. This puts you in the role of the giver, the one who brings about great pleasure, as in the give power to God in the Psalms. If you think of your own benefit, then you are really serving yourself, and that is a form of idolatry, God forbid. So in summing up, what is the Rebbe saying? Both studying and praying, thinking that I'm going to be the one who will get something out of this, or giving and teaching and thinking that I'm great because I'm the giver or teacher, those things are considered despicable. As our sages taught, Hashem despises all who are of haughty spirit. It is all who do these things that are despicable to Hashem, your God. That's in bold because that's the end of the verse. It's an abomination to God. Okay, now I realize that not everybody is going there are some people who are going to bring their 21st century sensibilities to this and maybe find a little bit of it disturbing. But I bring this to your attention simply because, and I think, you know what? I don't even have to do this. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Can you just scroll down, Tavara, a little bit? These are the editors of the book, Art Green and his students. This verse is obviously one that causes great discomfort to many contemporary readers. We often wonder how one might go about reinterpreting such texts, which, by the way, it strikes me as being enormously uninformed, because the rabbis of the Talmud went way out of their way to limit the cases of this to the point where cross-dressing is not a problem. So I don't know why they have to say that, but here is an example, one that takes the verse far out of the realm of cross-dressing, while still based on classic archetypes of man as giver and woman as receiver. And again, I think that that's biological. The verse has been rendered in a way that offers moral teachings that reach completely beyond gender. The intent of many a Hasidic teaching is to make us all into givers in the ever-flowing cosmic stream of love and compassion. We, both male and female, receive God's blessing constantly. We need to turn that gift around and transform ourselves into givers. I think I want to just share, and it's fun. Kim and I were talking about this yesterday. But I don't know, Kim. I don't even think I had sent this to you yesterday, by the time we were talking about it. But Kim and I were talking about the difference between traditional and not so traditional prayer. And one of the really not one of, but the fundamental difference between prayer as traditional Judaism sees it and more modern contemporary experiences of prayer is that the traditional prayer has as its goal moving God.
What does that mean?
It means it's not about me. It's not about how I feel. Prayer is something I do so that I can move God, meaning I can make God cry. I can make God change God's mind. I can make that prayer is a dynamic force that I have, that God is listening to, and that will have some effect on God. That's traditional prayer. When you walk into an Orthodox shul, that's what's going on. The goal here is to communicate myself to God in a way that's going to move God. In contemporary prayer, it's the opposite. The person davening is the one who needs or wants to feel moved. They want the prayer to transform themselves. They want to be transformed. They want to be different. Those are actually diametrically opposed approaches to prayer. And that's what you see when you walk into different kinds of synagogues. Here, again, I'm not making a judgment about this. I'm just trying to clarify the Hasidic text. And of course, we didn't have Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Renewal, or AJR, or anything like that in the 18th century, beginning of Reform. But when it says, when you pray or when you do a mitzvah, you shouldn't be wearing women's clothing. That is to say, you shouldn't be thinking of yourself as the one who receives. You should be thinking that this is an opportunity to interact with and to transform God.
Rabbi?
Mhm.
Wow.
Hi, it's Joni.
Hi.
Hi. This is this is my first time hearing any of this, and it's quite perplexing to me. I'm having issues with it, actually.
Good. I
I'm
mean, because if you could just hear that and go to sleep, then I didn't do my job.
So on one hand, if I'm going to go back to the male female and the clothing. I go back to first human, who
Right.
was not male or female. It was first human was androgynous.
Correct.
So
And presumably naked.
yes, so
Okay.
we didn't have to worry about clothes and buttons and zippers and all that stuff.
Right.
So if we're talking about androgyny, and I believe that even with androgyny separating into male and female, I do believe that there is within, I'm going to go out on a limb here, within all of us, a trace of androgyny.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. So then when it gets into the giving and the receiving, then that creates more separation. And if we're talking solely in the physical sense, okay, that's one thing. But if we still have that trace of androgyny, we're all givers and we're all receivers.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you. And this is a long conversation, which IJKL should actually program because it's a worthy one. But let me give you as quick an answer as I can.
Okay.
You are correct. Genesis chapter 1 is the creation of an androgynous being, which is why there's Genesis chapter 2, because that didn't work out. That's not what God wanted. God had to make a choice between creating something in his image, and please forgive the male pronoun, right. Creating something in his image, which would be one, meaning its totality has to be one, as God's totality is one.
Right.
That's fine. I can create in my image. What's the problem? Then I got the image of one, but this being can't be a creator.
Why?
Because how do you create if given human physiology and reproduction, how one androgynous person cannot create.
There are different animals. I know frogs in being separated can reproduce regardless male female. So,
but God didn't seem to think that was going to happen with people.
Oh,
because as soon as chapter 1 is over, chapter 2 begins.
Okay.
And in chapter 2, we're created not in God's image, but from the dust of the earth. And a man is created first, only for God to realize that you are lonely. You can't exist without someone else, and you will never be able to be a creator like me unless you have something else. And so therefore, God essentially kills that man, and then that's called sleep, and creates woman, because man has to be dead when woman is created, or else he would be superior to her, because generally speaking, whoever comes first is superior to whoever came after, which is my children have to stand up when I walk into the room, and I don't have to stand up when my children walk into the room. So now we have two. So God lost the oneness that he had in Genesis chapter 1, but got the creators in chapter 2. But the punchline of chapter 2 is that you can be one. Because how do two people actually become one person? Intercourse. In which biologically, the male enters the female. The female is the receiver.
Right.
Okay. So that's not to preclude, by the way, the androgynous nature of all of us. We actually believe that God himself is not a himself, but is a himself and a herself. And we talk at great length about the Shekhinah and the feminine aspects of God, which is very much part of traditional Judaism.
Right.
So we have that, but I think the Genesis chapter 1 example is problematic because of Genesis chapter 2. Okay, that there's more to talk about, but I got to move on. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to another text. Devorah, can you put us back to the Kedushas Levi? Kedushas Levi is Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, one of the most famous of Hasidic rabbis. And he wants to talk about the whole mitzvah of the bird's nest and the eggs or the fledglings. Okay, we don't have to read the whole text. The Talmud teaches, and I debated with myself whether we should learn this piece of Talmud, but it would become too complicated and take too much time. But if you have Sefaria or access to the Talmud, go to Tractate Brachot, page 33b. It's very interesting. The rabbis are working out the language of the Amida, the weekday Amida particularly, because that's the important one to them. Shabbos is an afterthought. Friday night and Saturday is an afterthought. The only way you can understand the Friday night and Saturday Amidas is to understand the weekday Amida, because that's what they really worked on. And so they're really struggling with the language and the order of the weekday Amida. And they're doing this at the same time as early Christianity is taking hold. And so there are a lot of discussions in which we don't want our davening to sound too much like what the Christians are saying. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And you and I are saying these same words today. It's really what happened. Thank you, Dvorah. Oh, good. Oh, I see. You can't get the whole thing on the page if you make it bigger. Is that it? Is that the problem that you're having? All right, it doesn't matter. So there's one conversation in which the rabbis say, if anybody would say in the Amidah, your mercies reach even to the bird's nest, be as merciful with us. Okay, that if someone would pen a prayer that said, God, be as merciful to me as you are with the bird, which essentially means my relationship with my children, and if you have Rahmanas on a bird, maybe how much more Rahmanas you should have on me. Okay, but if you draw that analogy in prayer, that person is to be silenced, meaning that's an unacceptable prayer. For the person is attributing to God the character of mercy, when in truth, this is the inscrutable decree of the king to his servants. Now, I know that doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but let's go on and I'll come back to that sentence. We're not allowed to daven a sentence that says, be merciful to me like you are with the bird. I want to say that emphatically. That's the language. Yet the Tosafot, who are Rashi's grandchildren, and they have a commentary on the page of Talmud, yet the Tosafot note this claim for mercy is made also by liturgical poets. For those of you who will be studying the poetry of the high holidays, these are what we're talking about, with me, the liturgical poets, who wrote, be righteous by fulfilling parent and offspring do not slaughter on the same day. Your thoughts be merciful toward us, your actions to elevate us. Then this is a piyut, a poem that's traditionally recited in very traditional synagogues on the second day of Pesach. But what's it saying? It's saying essentially the same thing. God, you're the one who said you shouldn't shecht the mother and the child at the same time. This is a different mitzvah from Leviticus chapter 22, because you want Rachmanis. You should have Rachmanis to me. So the Tosfos say, oh, wait a minute. Don't we do stuff like that? Don't we actually take the biblical verse and say, you have Rachmanis to animals, you should have Rachmanis to me? Going on in the text, these objections can be resolved based on the sage's teachings. Whoever is merciful upon creatures will receive the mercies of heaven. Again, we didn't study this text, but it's a beautiful text. What it means is, well, I'm not going to say what it means because he's going to say what it means. This is rooted in the Zohar's teaching that arousal above is response to that which is awakened below. A person who has mercy for God's creatures serves to arouse the quality of mercy in God and then receives of that mercy. Okay, so now on the basis of that paragraph, we can go back and understand what the problem is. When I don't pray for God for mercy and say, God, you were merciful on the birds, or you were merciful on the cow and the calf, so please be merciful to me. That's not how it works. God isn't going to be merciful to a cow or a bird or me. Mercy is something that is triggered by my behavior. Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but let me say this so that we'll make the rest of it feel that God isn't merciful to me because God is merciful. God is merciful to me because God has given to me in my world opportunities to be merciful. And when I act mercifully, I then trigger God's mercy. Do you see the difference? This places a tremendous responsibility on the human being. It means I'm actually in charge of God, that I'm going to trigger God's response. This has tremendous implications for the high holidays, which are coming up, as we'll talk about in a second. But let's go back to the text. We know that the compassion of God is not exhausted. The Blessed Holy One is constantly causing a goodly flow of mercy and compassion to come over us. Okay, God's always. I mean, maybe I said it differently. Okay, but I'll take back what I said and let's say it this way. I shouldn't have jumped the gun. If we are sometimes lacking in some good things, the obstacle is from our side. We are unworthy to receive that goodness. But the Blessed Holy One can, in great mercy, transform our hearts, giving us the purity and strength of heart to serve God in truth. Then we will be ready to receive that good. Okay, so he's saying it a little bit differently. God is always showing mercy on us. But if I am myself am not a merciful person, then I'm blocking the flow of divine mercy to me. And that by presenting the nest or presenting the calf and its mother, or presenting the poor person who needs a loan, God is giving me a chance to act mercifully, and in doing so, unblock the flow of mercy that has been coming down to me, but I just couldn't receive because I blocked it from myself. My own behavior blocked it from myself. Thus we pray, I'm back in the text, you, O Hashem, do not hold back your mercies from me. This is in the Psalm. That is, may there be no blockage from my side, because your compassion and truth protect me. And here they're kind of retranslating the word create me forever. Let's read a little bit more. The Blessed Holy One is creating you anew each moment, meaning your compassion and your truth. Through compassion and your truth, you're allowing me to recreate myself every day, every moment. Thus the Midrash says on the verse, Kol hanishama tehalel Yah, hallelujah. Okay, all the soul praise Yah, hallelujah, that one should offer praise for each and every breath. You create us anew in each moment, giving us a pure heart. Can you scroll a bit? Let's finish this. We just have one more paragraph. God's command that you may not take the mother along with her offspring does not reflect God's mercy upon the bird. If God wanted to be compassionate to the bird, he didn't have to command us. He could have protected the bird without us, for God surely has that capacity. Okay, now he's coming around and is saying it. God does not have Rahmanis for the bird. If God had Rahmanis for the bird, then God would have protected the bird. What's happening here? God's intent was rather that we arouse our quality of goodness by being compassionate toward the bird. That's what the poet meant in saying, your thoughts be merciful also before us, your actions to elevate us. You gave us this commandment so that we would act mercifully, arousing your mercy toward us. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful idea. It's not simple, but it's you can understand the mistake. We could look at the pshat as we did. We can look at the pshat and say, what's going on here? Yeah, I guess you can say it two ways. God had Rahmanas on the mother, which you're not allowed to say, or God is trying to make me a new person by giving me the opportunity to have Rahmanas on the mother. And the moment that I have Rahmanas on the mother, God will have Rahmanas on me. And I said, this has implications for the high holidays, of course, because we do believe this, that the divine is aroused by that which happens in us. So, I mean, the simplest thing is say we want to stand on Yom Kippur and clap our hearts and ask God for forgiveness. But if we're holding a grudge, God's going to look at us and say, what do you think I am? You can't forgive your sister or your brother or your mother or your father or your friend or your whatever, your business partner, but I'm supposed to forgive you? That's what it means. I'm supposed to be merciful to you. Show me mercy. Show me your mercy, and then I'll show you my mercy. Show me your forgiveness, and then I'll show you my forgiveness. This was a tremendous chiddush. This was a tremendous novelty on the part of Kabbalistic thinking, because Kabbalistic thinking put much more of the responsibility of the God-person relationship on the person. Okay, so it's not God. It's me. God gave me this mitzvah so that I could become a new me, a better me, and then God will become, and I will create for myself a different relationship with God. Okay, we're good? We can move on? That's scary, by the way. Something to work on for everybody. I mean, scary to me. Okay, the Or Torah. The Or Torah was someone. A second. I just saw a note that I wrote last night. Oh, I was reading another commentary on this commentary, but I couldn't bring it to you because it's not in translation. Forget the bird, okay? Forget the bird, because how many of us are going to come across a bird's nest and want the eggs, okay? It's not going to happen. And how many of us are going to be shechting a mother and a child on the same day? It's not happening. Here's one, and this is a Talmudic discussion, where a Roman official says, I think it's to Rabbi Akiva, why do you give tzedakah to the poor? If God wanted this person to have money, this person would have money. The fact that this person is poor suggests that this person is enduring some type of punishment, whatever it is, that God is not happy with this person, and therefore this person is suffering. And so who are you to go and take your money and give it to this person? If God wants this person to have a chicken dinner, God will give this person a chicken dinner. You don't have to go buy the person the chicken dinner. To which the answer is, God put this person in front of me so that I would buy him a chicken dinner, so that God will buy me a chicken dinner. That the poor exist so that they will bring out the merciful in us, the generous in us. And by the way, there is not a single one of us on this Zoom call who is not impoverished in some way or another. Okay, we may know where our lunch and our Shabbos dinner is coming from. We may have that. But there's not one of us who isn't impoverished and who doesn't need something desperately from someone else who may or may not give it to us. So here, that's what this is saying, that don't say that God has mercy on the bird. Don't say that God is punishing the poor. Look at these things as opportunity to bring out the qualities in us that we want God to show to us. Because God is, as Stevie Nicks said in Landslide, perhaps her most beautiful song, she called God a mirror in the sky. Beautiful image. God is just mimicking, is mirroring me. I can expect nothing from God that I myself don't do. Very scary thought. Okay, the Or Torah. The Or Torah is the Maggid of Mezrich. Also in the level of Hasidic rabbis like the Kedushas Levi, like Levi Yitzchak or Berditchev. These are the big leaders. This is very short, but I love it. This is on the roof fence. Ready? This refers to one offering a new interpretation of Torah. Okay, forget building a house. These Torah words are talking to Jeffrey Segelman, who would stand up from time to time, either on a pulpit or in a classroom, and say, I have a new interpretation of Torah. I have a chiddush. I can understand the Torah differently. That's what the Torah is talking about, according to the Maggid. Make a railing for your upper story. If the verse were referring to the literal house, it would have said, for its upper story. Notice how hyper-literally he's reading this, but in his hyper-literal reading, he's taking it to a whole new world. It didn't say, make a roof for its upper story. It said for your upper story. What does that mean? As it is, the upper story is on you, referring to the swelling of pride at this new teaching. Do not let your head get turned by pride, even though this is a bit of Torah that no ear has ever heard. It comes not from you, but from God. Who do you think put the idea in my head? And then it says, should someone fall from it, you are all set for such a fall. You know that this has already happened. That, well, let me, meaning if you, and forget Torah, okay? Their world was Torah, okay? Your world was Torah. You made a fortune in the stock market. You invented a new device. You're at the top of your field, meaning that's the roof. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're at the top of your field. No one does it better than you. If you let that go to your head, you will fall from that roof, as we have seen so many people do in the secular world and in the religious world. Make a fence, meaning it's not you, it's God. Don't get haughty, don't get cocky. And then, and we're not going to go into this, but his last sentence is, you know that this has already happened, that the vessels were broken because of pride when each one said, I will rule. This goes back to the Lurianic Kabbalistic view of how how the vessels shattered and tikkun of the vessels, but I part of me, my good excuse is I don't have time to go into it, but that's really a good excuse for my really saying I'm not sure I understand it well enough to teach it. So so if this verse inspires you to ask questions, I suggest that you direct them to Rabbi Akiva, because he Taka gets it. Okay, let's scroll and do one more, because we're going to get a chance to actually finish today. I'm so happy. The Noam Elimelech, which is Elimelech of Linsk, or Linetsk, I think it's pronounced. Sometimes I'm not sure with all the Polish names of towns. Remember this one? This was our fourth verse. If a man in the camp becomes impure because of a nocturnal emission, he should leave the camp and not enter it. As evening comes, he should wash in the water in the mikveh, and then the sun sets, he can enter the camp. Okay, we saw that verse. Very straightforward, very simple pshat. Let's go. This verse can be applied to the case of a righteous person who follows the ways of God, but has not yet completely purified his thoughts. In this context, the nocturnal occurrence alludes to the night of lowliness and sin that he has entered. He has not yet purified his body to the extent that it is protecting him. It is protected from such impurity. His eyes are not protected from watching what they should not watch and from seeing evil. His ears still hear, and his mouth can still speak words not uttered in awe and in the service of the Blessed One. Okay, I think he's talking about all of us here, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think he would agree with that, but I would say that. He's talking about someone who absolutely positively knows what's right and what's wrong, who behaves in a way that has honesty and integrity. Okay, I'm kind of stripping the religious nature out of this, okay, because he would say it's the person that keeps kosher, the person is Shomer Shabbos, the person is davening 3 times a day, the person is doing everything right. It's a righteous person. He's not ripping anybody off. He's giving tzedakah. But you know what the problem is? It hasn't sunk into his unconscious, his subconscious. He still gets captured by the cleavage of the girl who walks by him on the street. He's not there yet. And that's the idea of the nocturnal occurrence. It's happening. It's not that I even want it to happen. It's happening involuntarily. It's happening in my subconscious. It's happening in my unconscious. I know that I am not really where I want to be. So now let's go back to the text. The text offers this person advice. He should leave the camp. Now, when I first read this, I was, what? We gotta keep going. This means that when you find yourself outside the camp of the holy ones, you have to work on basics. You cannot engage in the work of holy tzaddikim who delve into supernal secrets. Their awe and love for God are perfect and not marred by sinful thoughts at all. You're not there yet. When your mind is not clear and your limbs are not prepared for God's service, how could you enter the palace and go through the king's treasures? This is actually dangerous. As the jealous ones attack him, the forces of externality can grab you and push you deeper into sin. He said, this is an interesting way of saying it. He says the camp that you're in, the camp that you have to leave, is the camp of the great tzaddikim, the camp of your aspirations. Leave that camp temporarily. It's too much for you. I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I was watching the Yankees game last night while I was preparing this. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I was watching yesterday afternoon while I was preparing this, and they brought up some minor leaguers to the team, and I'm thinking, when you can't make it in the majors, leave. Go back to AAA, go back to AA, where we work on the basics. Don't try to hang out with people who you're not going to get to yet. That's what he means. Let's go and see a little bit more. You must therefore prepare your soul and body with practices that are outside of the camp of supernal holiness. Take upon yourself some aesthetic practice, regret and repent. Keep yourself away from things that provoke sin. Make a real effort to clear your mind and pay attention to your actions. Are you doing them wholeheartedly? I need you to scroll, Dvorah. Are you doing, thank you, are you doing deeds wholeheartedly? Do your deeds do your deeds honestly without any mixture of leaven? That's haughtiness, dross, or corruption. Do not mix good with evil. Cleave to, you scroll more, the holy Torah, study it in purity, and go to the mikveh when you should. Then approach dveikut and enthusiasm, and your heart will ignite with the brightness of supernal holiness. Okay? Meaning sometimes you have to leave the camp, in the sense that the camp represents the ultimate. The camp represents the complete fulfillment. When you're in the midst of that, it's really hard to work on basics because we get distracted by the greatness. Sometimes we need to leave the presence of our teachers, of our Rebbes, and just work on the basics. Because if I can't get to where I want to get to, the problem is probably that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do the right way. I'm going through the motions, but it's not changing me. It's not transforming me. It's a tremendous, because it's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive. And I don't know enough about Elimelech of Linetsk to know what his position was within the Hasidic world. But it almost is anti-Hasidic, because the Hasidic world wants you to attach yourself to the Rebbe. But sometimes attaching yourself to the Rebbe is not a good thing, because then you can't get there. You're not there. Either you can't get there, or you're busy trying to be the Rebbe, but you don't have the foundation yet.
Rav Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that Elimelech was a great leader and scholar, and his brother was Reb Zusia.
Yeah, that I think you're right.
And I did ask Akiva to verify that connection, so that dynamic could be also playing out.
Yeah, because this is very Zusia-esque. Okay, you've got to be yourself. You've got to be your best self. And sometimes in order to be your best self, you need to walk away from the camp.
And he was also known to send people to see his brother.
Interesting. That I didn't know. I don't know enough about all of this. So Yeshikoach, thank you. But I think that the takeaway here is that we don't need to aspire to be 10 rungs higher than we are. If that's our aspiration, we're just going to end up with nocturnal emissions in the spiritual sense, whatever that means. Rather, we need to stay on our rung and look just at one rung above us. Sometimes that's hard to do when we're in the camp that's 10 rungs above us. Let me just be where I am and look for one rung above us, and let me get there. Let me pick the thing that I can work on and get better at it, and let me get there. And that's why you have to leave the camp, because while you are associating with people who are so far above you, you'll never get there. You need to leave them and work on yourself one rung at a time. Okay. I did all 4 texts, and it's only 11:42. So we can take a question or two if people have, and you can stop the share. How are we? We're good. I hate to even.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
And it wasn't really on the point, so I held it. How do we account for the promise of long life as a reward for a mitzvah when it really isn't necessarily promised? Does
Right.
that negate God's, in some way?
No, I mean, it's a question of how we understand what long life means. For me personally, I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean we can all agree that it doesn't mean that you're going to live to 120. Okay, because we know plenty of people who do the mitzvahs that they're supposed to do and don't live to 120. We know plenty of people who do the mitzvahs and don't live to 60. So it can't mean that, because that never happens. I mean, it never ever happens. So we have to look at the language and say what the Hebrew, and I love this, and I know that Kim, you'll appreciate it because you appreciate Hebrew. Orech Yamim literally means length of days. So maybe it means when I do mitzvot, I structure my life such that my days are longer, meaning I get more in to my day. I don't waste time. I'm mindful of who I am and what it is that I'm supposed to do. So I have orech yamim. I have literally length of days. Maybe that's what it means. I mean, but it certainly can't mean I'm living a long time, because that doesn't happen. In fact, when we were talking, I'll finish with this. When we were talking, when Marcia and I and IJKL were doing the book As a Driven Leaf, Elisha ben Abuya, according to one of the midrashim, there are a number of midrashim that talk about how Elisha became a heretic. But one of them is just this, that a boy and his father are walking along the way. The father, they see a nest in a tree. The father says to the son, I'm hungry. Go get me the eggs. The son climbs the tree, sees the mother, shoos the mother away, and then falls down and dies. So here he's fulfilling the mitzvah of honoring his father, simultaneously fulfilling the mitzvah of shooing the mother bird away. 2 mitzvot in the Torah that talk about long life, and he dies. And Elisha looks at that and says, this is all a crock of crap. How could this be? And then he abandons Judaism. And he's castigated for that because he knows better. that the greatness of Judaism is that it's interpretable. And he chose to read it as a fundamentalist. And fundamentalists, it's hard to sustain a fundamentalist view. But he read it as a fundamentalist and not as a rabbi. So he gets excluded from the rabbis. All right, anyway, I'm not going to see you next week.
Dr. Sandra Lilienthal will be attempting to fill your shoes.
Yeah, she's going to be great. I'm going to be back in Israel and for a wedding of a son of good friends. And that's a week from last night. And then I'll be with my family, with my daughter for Shabbos. So, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. So,
Right.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
And we'll see you for poetry next Thursday night, if I'm not making
Not
up
next
lies.
Thursday night. I'll be in Israel next Thursday night.
The week from.
2
I'm
weeks.
I'm just so anxious to
from
have
last-
you.
the 7th.
2 weeks from last night,
Right.
the 7th.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Bye,
shalom.
Shalom. Safe travels.
Thank
Oh,
you.
wonderful. Just wonderful. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
But,
Bye.